Today's lesson is Nargis Mohammadi, the Nobel winner defying tyranny. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Mike.
And today we're going to continue talking about an Iranian woman by the name of Nargis Mohammadi. She has won the Nobel Peace Prize. She is the Nobel laureate, or the winner of this particular prize or this particular award. But she didn't really know about receiving the prize or receiving the award, or she probably did not because at the moment she is in prison in Iran. And of course, we talked about her history as well when she studied physics at the university and when she wrote for a newspaper there. And she also became a critic of the government, but she also is a target of the government.
Absolutely. I'm sure she would have much rather won a Nobel Prize for physics, but that's not the way her life has worked out. She has been an activist for women's rights and more human rights in Iran since she was a college student 32 years ago. Her husband is also a pro-reform journalist. They have both dedicated their lives and put their safety at risk as family and as just people in speaking out against the Islamic authoritarian government in Tehran, a government that gives its people few freedoms and gives women in society even fewer than that. And she has dedicated her life to fight against this and to change Iran, to open up society, to give more freedoms for people. And her fight for freedom has ended up with her losing her freedom. She has been in jail in the notorious or the famously bad Evin prison in Tehran for many years. And that is where she was when she won her Nobel Prize. Now her kids have collected the prize, but she is still locked up. So hopefully one day she will be reunited with her family and will be able to really accept the prize.
Okay, let's begin today's lesson by listening to the first part, and we'll be right back.
While courageous, Mohammadi's activism came at a huge personal cost. After being jailed briefly several times, she received her first lengthy prison term in 2011. With political prisoners in Iran routinely subjected to torture, solitary confinement, and even execution, Mohammadi's time in prison naturally took a heavy physical and mental toll on her. But despite the harsh conditions, her spirit remained unbroken, and after her release in 2012, she continued to speak out.
大家好，第一部分我们来介绍形容词 courageous， 它的意思是勇敢的或是有胆量的。例如 The courageous dog swam into the lake to save the drowning boy. 那只勇敢的狗游进湖里拯救那位溺水的男孩。又或者说 Anita was courageous to speak in front of so many people. Anita 勇敢的在一大群人们面前演讲。接着是形容词 lengthy， 这个单字的意思是漫长的或是冗长的。举例来说 After a lengthy investigation, the politician was cleared of wrongdoing. 经过一番漫长的调查，那名政治人物洗刷罪名了。又或者说 Before graduating, we had to sit through a lengthy speech by the university president. 在领取大学毕业证书前，我们得先耐着性子听完校长的冗长演说。接下来我们看到片语 subject somebody 或是 something to something， 它的意思是使某人或某事物遭受或是承受……例如 According to reports, police subjected the suspect to intense questioning. 根据报道，嫌犯遭到警方激烈的询问。或者 The accident subjected Megan to a broken leg. 此次意外使 Megan 遭受腿部骨折。
Okay, here in the first part of today's lesson, it says, while courageous, even though she is courageous or she is brave, Mohammadi's activism came at a huge personal cost. So it is true that she is courageous, but still she had to suffer a lot. If you're courageous, you're brave, you're willing to do things that are dangerous, you will do things that other people are afraid to do. So indeed, that is the case in Iran. There are a few people who want to speak out against the government because you might be in big trouble. And yes, indeed, the government has been in charge there for many, many years. It's not going away anytime soon. So she is courageous for speaking out against the government, but still, this came at a huge personal cost. A personal cost is just a big sacrifice. So yes, indeed, she did make these sacrifices to let her voice be heard, but she paid the price for that. She had to suffer in other ways.
That's right. She is in jail now, and sadly, this is not her first experience in an Iranian jail. It says after being jailed briefly several times, she received her first lengthy prison term in 2011. So she had been in jail before, briefly, for short periods of time, but then she got a lengthy prison term in 2011. And this is not the first time, as I said. Often these authoritarian governments will kind of lock you up briefly to scare you, hoping that that will stop you from, causing trouble. But if you persist, if you keep doing it, if you keep fighting for your rights, they will finally put you in jail for a lengthy period of time, a long period of time. When we say lengthy, we just mean long. How was the movie? It was really good, but rather lengthy. 3.5 hours is too long to sit in a movie theater. So if something is lengthy, we're just saying it's long. And a prison term is a time in jail. If you found guilty of a crime, then they say you're going to jail for 3 years. That is your prison term. A prison term of 3 years or 3 years in jail.
Now, here in the next sentence, it says, with political prisoners in Iran routinely subjected to torture, solitary confinement, and even execution, Mohammadi's time in prison naturally took a heavy physical and mental toll on her. Okay, so this is quite a long sentence, so let's break it down. We've got political prisoners in Iran, and with them subjected to torture and other things, her time in prison took a toll on her. That's basically what this sentence is telling us. If you're subjected to something, or if you're subject to something, that means you have to endure this. It has to happen to you. You have no choice. So if you're in prison in Iran, you're probably going to be tortured. To torture someone is basically to cause someone serious discomfort in order to get information from them. Usually, you might torture them just because you think it's fun or something, or to intimidate or something, but in this particular case, she was tortured probably for information, and also she had to endure solitary confinement. That means you are all by yourself in a jail cell, and you probably don't get to see any light. There are no windows, and you get fed maybe once or twice a day. You don't get to talk to other people. That can be really terrible. And also, people are subject to execution, which means you're basically killed for your crimes.
You could be shot, you could be hung, things like that. I'm sure there's not a lot of legal rights that you have. So basically, they've made her life as difficult, as painful, as terrible as possible. And she could be killed at any moment. This is the price you pay for being a human rights activist in a country like Iran. Mohammadi's time in prison naturally took a heavy physical and mental toll on her. So this time in prison, not only away from her family and away from her freedom, but she's getting older. They don't have good doctors. I mean, there's all sorts of terrible things that can happen in prison. So it has taken a heavy physical and mental toll. It has taken it has cost her. This is the result of it. This is the effect of all of this time. The torture that she may have been subject to, the solitary confinement. It has all taken or created a heavy physical and mental toll on her. A toll is a price. Often when you have to pay money to drive down a road, that's a toll. Maybe to cross a bridge, too, a toll bridge or a toll booth on a highway is a place you stop to pay money. So it's a price, basically not a price in money, but a price in happiness, in comfort, in her health, in her joy, and seeing her family, watching her kids grow up. All of that stuff has really been very difficult for her. And they've, I guess, done that on purpose in order to try to be cruel, to punish her for fighting for human rights. But despite the harsh conditions, her spirit remained unbroken. And after her release in 2012, she continued to speak out. So she endured this for about a year, it seems, at that point. But she got out of jail. She was still the same person that she was, maybe, a little beaten up, a little bit older and wiser, but it didn't stop her from wanting to fight for human rights. The cost to her physically and emotionally and mentally was one she was willing to pay. So her spirit remained unbroken. She remained as determined as ever to fight for human rights. And she continued to speak out, continued to write and speak to people about her belief in rights and her ideas for reform and the way she continues to want to change Iran for the better.
So she didn't keep her mouth shut like a good little girl. She continued to speak out, and she probably got in trouble as a result of that. Let's move on now to the second part of our lesson. We will listen to it first.
Not surprisingly, this led to further persecution from Iran's authorities, and Mohammadi has been jailed repeatedly in the years since, with her most recent sentence beginning in 2021. Nonetheless, her determination has never weakened, and she has continued her efforts to hold the authorities to account. In 2022, for example, the BBC published a report she wrote about the sexual and physical abuse inflicted against women arrested during mass protests. The protests were inspired by Mahsa Amini, a young woman who died in police custody.
第二部分先看到名词 authority， 它的意思是当局或是官方。例如 When the company employees noticed the theft, they immediately called the authorities. 当公司员工发现窃盗行为后，他们立即向警方当局报警。或是 The authorities at the university had to determine if the students were guilty of cheating on the exam. 大学官方必须确定那些学生是否有考试作弊。再来介绍片语 hold, bring 或是 call somebody to account， 指的是追究某人的责任或是要求某人做出解释。例如 The manager holds Ivan to account for the financial loss of the company. 经理将公司的财务损失追究在 Ivan 身上。或是 The angry fans brought the concert organizer to account for the ticket chaos. 愤怒的粉丝要求演唱会主办单位针对混乱票务做出解释。再看一个例子 Jim was called to account for graffiti on the streets. Jim 需要在对街上乱涂鸦一事负责。
Okay, here in the second part, it says, not surprisingly, this led to further persecution from Iran's authorities, and Mohammadi has been jailed repeatedly in the years since, with her most recent sentence or jail term beginning in 2021. So, yes, this led to further persecution. Persecution just refers to when a government or some kind of person or people in power go after you. They're hostile to you. They don't treat you well. They may beat you up. They may threaten your family. You're threatened and you're subject to further persecution. They probably said nasty things to her. And again, they probably threatened her family. Hey, we know where your children go to school every day, so you better keep your mouth shut or something's going to happen to them. And of course, we're talking about Iran's authorities, and that refers to the people who are in charge, the people in the government.
That's right. The government, the police, the security forces, the people who can make these decisions and put you in jail. So she is still speaking out against these authorities, and she has been jailed repeatedly in the years since. So since her release in 2012, she has been in and out of jail at various different times, with her most recent sentence beginning in 2021. Here, a sentence is not like a group of words, as we would read a sentence on a page. No, a sentence is a period in jail that is legally decided for you by a judge or by a jury or something like that. So if they say you're going to jail for 5 years, that is your 5-year sentence, similar to the term prison term we saw earlier. So her most recent sentence, or time in jail, began in 2021.
Nonetheless, or even though this is the case, her determination has never weakened, and she has continued her efforts to hold the authorities to account. So nonetheless, even though what we just mentioned is true, still, this did not affect her determination. If you have determination, that means you really want to accomplish something and you're not going to let anybody stop you. You have a firmness of purpose. You are resolute. And so here she had this determination, and it has not weakened. It maybe even made her stronger, and she has continued her efforts to hold those authorities to account. And here we've got the phrase to hold someone to account. That means you insist that they take responsibility for the bad thing that they did.
They can't just say sorry, or they can't just say, oh, we won't do it again. No, there is a price to be paid for your bad actions. In 2022, for example, the BBC published a report she wrote about the sexual and physical abuse inflicted against women arrested during mass protests. These were big protests, mass protests. So it wasn't just, 100 people standing outside a government building with a small crowd. These were thousands and thousands of people. They were all over Iran, not just in the capital city, but in many other cities, men, women, most of them quite young, but of all ages, really. But of course, the police cracked down on this. They arrested a lot of people, and they seemed to particularly focus some of their cruelty on the women, trying to frighten the women into shutting up, into going home, into not joining the protests. And there was physical abuse. Women were beaten up, and also sexual abuse. So they might have been sexually assaulted in jail and other places. And so she wrote about this. She said, the police weren't out there being nice to everyone, treating everyone with respect and dignity. No, they were being purposely cruel to try to shut the protest down and frighten the protesters back into their homes.
And why were these mass protests taking place? Well, the protests were inspired by Mahsa Amini, a young woman who died in police custody. Now, here we've got the word custody. That means somebody is responsible for somebody. They are the legal guardian of that person. In this particular case, they were talking about police custody when you are detained or held by the police. You also might hear about people who've been through a divorce, and then the husband and the wife have to fight for the children's custody. Who gets the children? Who is responsible for the children? In this particular case, they were talking about just being held by the police. Okay, we're at the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Let's listen now to the third part.
It was for this extraordinary courage and relentless commitment to justice that Mohammadi was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. From the darkness of a prison cell, Mohammadi shines a light that will continue to guide activists around the world in the ongoing struggle against oppression, cruelty, and tyranny.
第三部分看到 relentless 这个形容词指的是严厉、艰困或残酷的状况持续不断的意思。举例来说 Betty was relentless in her pursuit of a job. Betty 持续不断的找工作。或是 The police dog was relentless in pursuing criminals. 那只警犬持续追踪罪犯。最后一个例子 Even with his umbrella, Frank got wet because of the relentless rain. 即使带了雨伞Frank 还是因为下不停的雨而弄湿了。
Okay, everybody, let's continue with our lesson. Here in the third part it says, It was for this extraordinary courage and relentless commitment to justice that Mohammadi was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Okay, it was for these reasons. It was because of these reasons, because she had this extraordinary courage. Extraordinary means beyond normal, okay? It's not something you see every day. It's very unusual, it's remarkable, it's significant. And some people say this extraordinary. That pronunciation is used as well, but I think more people say extraordinary. And yes, she had this extraordinary courage, and she also had this relentless commitment to justice. If something's relentless, it does not stop. It does not rest. She continues, even though she's been jailed and she has been tortured and she had to suffer solitary confinement and things like that. Despite this, she's still relentless and she has this commitment. Commitment here just means kind of a promise.
Exactly, a commitment to justice, and for that she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, obviously she is very committed. That would be the adjective form. She's been in jail many times. She is still doing it, and she is clearly relentless. She won't quit. She's going to keep going until rights become a reality in a country like Iran. From the darkness of a prison cell, Mohammadi shines a light that will continue to guide activists around the world in the ongoing struggle against oppression, cruelty, and tyranny, just like human rights activists in countries like Russia and China and other places. She is still doing work, or at least serving as a very good example for people from the darkness of a prison cell. A prison cell is like a jail cell. It's that small room with bars on the windows and bars for doors that you get locked into for 24 hours a day or whatever. As a prisoner, very cold and uncomfortable, limited food, limited space to exercise, probably few people to talk to, and certainly no access to the outside world. So from this place, this prison that she is in, the darkness of her cell, she shines a light that will continue to guide activists. Here, she's not actually physically shining a light. She is acting as an example, as a beacon, as a well-known example of a person who is fighting for rights despite all of the hardships. And this will continue to guide activists, or be an inspiration to activists around the world in the ongoing or continuing struggle against oppression, cruelty, and tyranny. When you're not just arresting people for breaking the law, but you're beating them up, you're locking them in jail for unknown periods of time, you're torturing them, this cruelty, this basically causing pain and stress and grief simply to do it, not for any reason, simply because you want to be mean and you want to make a person suffer.
Right. Some people are vegetarians because they don't like cruelty to animals, for example. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Let's listen now to Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第一部分最后一句提到，尽管条件恶劣，穆罕默迪的精神始终并未被打垮。在2012年被释放后，他继续公开发言。那这边有两个重点。第一个重点是文中他用 Her spirit remained unbroken 来描述他的精神始终并未被打垮。Remain 当连缀动词可以表达保持什么什么，仍旧还是怎么样怎么样。那么后面可以接名词或形容词来当补语，说明状态。就像文中它是接形容词 unbroken。那我们再看一个例句是 The cause of his death remains a mystery. 他的死因仍然是个谜。那这边我们就是用名词来当补语咯。好，那第二个要看的重点是文中用到片语 speak out 来表达公开发表意见。我们常常会用 speak out against 加名词去表达挺身而出反对什么，公开反对什么。像是 We must speak out against bullying. 我们必须挺身而出反对霸凌。那顺便补充一下 speak up 这个片语，它其实有提高嗓门大声讲话的意思。那当我们公开表达意见的时候也必须大声讲话，所以 speak up 还可以表示为了某人而辩护，或者是呢抗议某事而毫无顾忌的去直接表达看法。那我们就可以用 speak up for something 去表达公开支持某事物，或者是 speak up for somebody, speak up for oneself 来表达为某人发声辩护，仗义直言。举例来说The actress has continually spoken up for animal rights. 那位女演员持续为动物权利发声。接着读到课文第二部分的第一句，不出所料，这导致了伊朗当局的进一步迫害。文中是用 persecution 这个名词去表达迫害，尤其是指因为种族啊、政治理念、宗教等等而受到迫害。好，那我们这边来学它的字首字根。看到 sequ 或者是 secu 或者是 sue 这一类的字根有紧跟、跟随那种 follow 的意思。那在 persecution 这个字当中，它的字首 per 表示彻底，字根 secu 是跟随， tion 是名词字尾。当某一个人他一直如影随形跟在你后面跟得很彻底，是不是会让人觉得不舒服、很困扰呢？用这样的方式也许可以联想到 persecution 它有迫害或者是困扰、烦扰的意思。顺便补充两个有这一类字根的单字。第一个是 pursue， 它的字首 pur 是源自于 pro， 表示向前，在点点点之前。那字根 sue 表示跟随。那同学们可以想象，目标在前方，那你一直跟随着目标向前迈进，用这样的方式也许可以联想到 pursue 有追求、追寻的意思。 第二个补充的是 consequent， 它的字首 con 表示共同一起，字根 sequ 表示跟随， ent 是形容词字尾，跟着一起来应该很容易联想到 consequent， 它表示随之而来的，随之发生的。好，那以上今天重点整理，我们回顾今天单字吧。
Courageous. With the fire quickly spreading, the firemen's courageous actions saved several lives. Execution. The prisoner's execution sparked a debate about whether the death penalty is morally acceptable. Authority. After a large increase in traffic accidents, the authorities created new regulations to improve public safety. Determination. In spite of facing many challenges, Wanda's determination to succeed in her career remained strong. Custody. John was briefly taken into police custody because he looked similar to the person who had committed the robbery. Extraordinary. Sarah's extraordinary performance left the audience in amazement. Commitment. Philip's strong commitment to animal welfare led him to volunteer at an animal shelter. Cruelty. The reporter's investigation revealed the cruelty with which cows are sometimes treated in meat processing plants.
Discussion Starter starts now!
Here's our discussion starter. The question is, which aspect of Nargis Mohammadi do you respect the most and why?
I admire Nargis Mohammadi's courage the most. It's because despite all of the hardships, being locked in prison, being away from her family, she continues her fight for human rights. It's taken a huge personal toll on her, and I don't think anyone would disrespect her or respect her less for deciding to sort of retire from this business, maybe try to get out of the country, move to a safe country where she can, be a university professor or make speeches, but she continues to stay in the country she is fighting for rights in, and I think that is absolutely amazing.
Very admirable. But the aspect of Nargis Mohammadi that I respect the most is her choice to become a journalist after university. She did study physics, and she could have worked for some company working in a laboratory or something like that. But I studied journalism before, and if you're a reporter, you get to talk to people, you get to travel to different places. So I think that was a wise career decision on her part.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I am Roger. See you next time.